So this is the math calculator test for test 10 of the Khan Academy test. So I pre-did the questions. Hopefully this goes a little quicker. If you got questions on anything I'm talking about, feel free to reach out to me. Mr. McLean is my name. So number one, a helicopter initially hovering 40 feet above the ground begins to gain altitude at a rate of 21 feet per second. Which of the following functions represent the helicopter's altitude above the ground, y in feet, t seconds after the helicopter begins to gain altitude? So this is a situation where you got 40 feet of height already, and then you're adding 21 feet every second. So that would be B. And again, look at the other choices. This one is 40 feet, but then you don't have any variable attached to 21. This one's subtracting, and this one's putting the t on the 40. So this would be a situation where the answer is B. And again, just kind of remembering strategizing for the SAT. The earlier questions are typically, in a relative sense, easier than the later questions. So these first couple actually are kind of tricky, but let's talk about them. And again, understand they should be a little bit easier than the ones later on in the test. So number 2 says a text messaging plan charges a flat fee of $5 per month for up to 100 text messages plus 25 cents for each additional text message sent that month. Which of the following represents the cost Y of sending X texts in a month? And I circled A, and you can see the answer. So you're going to pay $5 up until you send 100 texts, and then your cost is going to increase at a rate of 25 cents for each additional text, right? This one is $5 until 100, then goes down, which makes no sense. The y-axis represents the cost. It tells us that, right? Cost is Y. So I just underline that so that we could see that little piece. And then, so then you kind of look at the other choices, and this one is obviously going straight up, even though it should be $5 until there's 100, and this one goes straight down. Again, it should be $5 until it hits 100. All right, question 3, again, kind of a similar question to 2, where you're trying to figure out the graph that represents the situation, but this one says Jake buys a bag of popcorn. He eats half the popcorn during the first 15 minutes of previews, and after eating half the popcorn, he stops for 30 minutes. Then he gradually eats the popcorn until he accidentally spills all the remaining popcorn. Which of the following graph represents the situation? In this case, they do define the x and y axes. This is time, and this is the amount of popcorn in the bag. So then I kind of think about, so he's eating for the first 15 and then stops. This one's kind of close. He stops, but he only stops for 15 minutes, keeps eating, and then he dumps it out. So there should be 0, but for some reason it goes straight up, so it can't be A. B is the answer. You can see what happens here. He's eating, stops for 30 minutes, eating, and then spills, right? So that would be a good representation. Like in C and D, you have situations, or both of those talk about the amount of popcorn in the bag increasing, which is that makes no sense, right? So the amount of popcorn in the bag should be decreasing the entire time, simply because of the fact that he's eating it or not eating. He's eating it, stops, and then he starts eating it, yet the amount of popcorn in the bag should not go up. So that's what happens in both C and D. So it's B. Part 4, we got 20 minus x equals 15. What's the value of 3x? This is a pretty straightforward question. It's just solving. So in order to find x, so this is a classic SAT question where they have you find x, which is 5, and you see that's a distracting answer. But the answer isn't 5, the answer is 3 times 5, because I wanted to find 3x. So there's always a question like this where it asks you to find something other than x, so just be careful with that. And it's an easy question if you just read it fully. Number 5, this is for the function, what's the value of f of -1, and that's just a matter of plugging in -1. So this is a pretty easy question as well, you get 1. All right, on to question 6. This is which of the following is equivalent to 2x times parentheses x squared minus 3x. So this is a distributing question, knowing how to multiply variables. So you get 2x cubed minus 6x squared. So that would be my answer for that one. So that one's pretty quick. Number 7 is a reading comprehension question. So it says a retail company has 50 large stores located at different areas throughout the state. A researcher for the company believes that the employee job satisfaction varies greatly from store to store. Which of the following sampling methods is most appropriate to estimate the proportion of all employees of the company who are satisfied with their job? So let's talk about each choice. So A says selecting one of the 50 stores at random and surveying. Well, that wouldn't tell you anything. That's not representative of all the stores, right? So if you're talking about trying to figure out how much job satisfaction varies, you don't want to look at one store, right? That wouldn't be good. B is the answer, and it looked pretty good. So selecting 10 employees from each store at random and then surveying each employee. That would probably be the best method. C, it says surveying the 25 highest paid employees at the 25 lowest paid. I mean, again, that's a biased sample where you're going to get different feelings from each group, where it's not a random sampling of the satisfaction of the stores. D, it says creating a website on which employees can express their opinions. That's not a bad idea. However, it's not a it's a volunteer basis, so it's not a random sample. So again, you want to create a design, you want to design an experiment, you want to have as random a sample as possible. Okay. Number 8, So you got two people. This is two graphs above show the total amounts of money that Ian and Jeremy have each deposited into their savings accounts for the first 7 weeks after opening their accounts. After they made the initial deposits, how much more did Ian deposit each week than Jeremy? So this is kind of a slope question. So Ian is this steeper graph, Jeremy is this flat graph. So it's like, okay, so every week it looks like Ian is depositing $100, so that he's got that pretty much that over 1 week up 100, over 1 week up 100, whereas Jeremy's going over 1 week up like half, over 1 week up half. So after 2 weeks, he's deposited 100. So that means he's going 50 a week. So how much more does Ian deposit each week than Jeremy? He deposits 50 more each week. So answering the correct question is important in that question, in that case. All right, number 9 is an exponential. It's a matter of just plugging some values in. So if I want to find h of 5 minus h of 3, h of 5 is 2 to the 5th is 32. H of 3 is 2 to the 3rd, which is 8. H of 5 minus h of 3 is 32 minus 8, which is 24. So that's a pretty just straight math, pure math question there. All right, so number 10 is another sampling question where it says a researcher surveyed a random sample of students from a large university about how often they see movies. Using the sample data, the researcher estimated that 23% of the students in the population saw a movie at least once per month. The margin of error for this estimation is 4%. Which of the following is the most appropriate conclusion about all students at the university based on the given estimate for the and margin of error? So you got 2 bits of data here. You got that 23% they think, and then a 4% margin of error. So what that means is that the actual number falls somewhere around 23%. So it could fall anywhere from 23 plus 4, so 27%, or 23 minus 4, 19. So the answer is D, because it is plausible that the percentage of students who saw a movie at least once a month is between 19 and 27. So that is the assumption that you can make because of the margin of error being 4%. So that means, like, again, 23 plus 4 is 27, and then 23 minus 4 is 19. That's how you work the margin of error. But if you read the other choices, they kind of don't make sense. It says A, it is unlikely that less than 23% of the students see a movie at least once per month. Well, based on the margin of error, it is possible. So I don't want to say it's unlikely. B, at least 22%, but no more than 25% of students see a movie at least once per month. No, because the margin of error is 4. So 23 plus 2 is 25. So it should be within, that's not within the margin of error. And C, the researcher is between 19 and 27% sure that most students see a movie at least once per month. That's okay. There's this sample of data is trying to determine the amount of times that students see movies. It's not trying to determine the confidence, and it's a different thing. So you take in stats, it's not a confidence interval. It's a margin of error. It's just like a sampling of data and trying to figure out like what the larger population is thinking. So C is close to the answer, but it's not a confidence interval. 11 is also sort of tricky. I wrote a lot out here, so if you want to pause this and read this, but it says the table above shows a list of 2 numbers, which are the following true statement. So I found it says all of it, and then you read the choices. It says the mean are the same, or the means are different, and the standard deviation is the same, or the standard deviation is different. So I found the mean. Mean is easy. Mean is average. So I add the numbers, divide by the number of numbers. So add the numbers, divide by the number of numbers. Both means are the same. So I'm like, okay, I know the means are the same. So I'm like, it's not C and D. So I've narrowed it down. A 50-50 shot. Even if I don't have any idea what standard deviation is, I should be able to get this one right half the time. But if you do have some idea, if you've never tried to do standard deviation formula, don't do it now, right? And this isn't even asking you to do the standard deviation formula. It's really just asking you to understand what standard deviation is, and that is it is how spread out the numbers are. So realizing that it's just a matter of the spread, and the fact that the top graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the list A, is more spread out than the bottom, which goes from 2 to 5, indicates that the standard deviations are different. So don't try to compute standard deviation. And there's probably like 10 ways you can compute it with your calculator or with, by hand, but really you're just trying to figure out, is the spread the same? And you can clearly see that it is not. They're not spread out in the same way. All right, last one, number 12 on this page. So a book was on sale for 40% off its original price. If the sale price was $18, what was the original price? This is a classic percent question. So if I call the original price X, the sale price is $18. I know that if I took 40% off, I'm paying 60% of the original price, right? So that's 0.6 times X. So I got this 0.6 by taking 40% away from 100, which is 0.6. So that's the original price times 60% of that original price is going to equal the sale price, 18, divided by 0.60. So I can see that the original price is 30. And if you look at this, I mean, these two are clearly not the answer, because if it's on sale for $18, it couldn't have originally been more than 18 or less than 18. So it's either 30 or 45. And actually, you're like, well, 45 to 18, that's more than half off. So you're like, it can't be. You can almost like reason out that it's got to be 30 based on the choices. All right, so on to 13. 13 and 14 use this same chart. So let's kind of read this chart and understand it. So this is 3 colonies of insects were each treated with a different pesticide over an 8-week period to test the effectiveness of the 3 pesticides. Colonies A, B, and C were treated with pesticides A, B, and C respectively. Each pesticide was applied every 2 weeks to one of the 3 colonies over the 8-week period. The bar graph above shows the insect counts for each of the 3 colonies, 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8 weeks after the initial treatment. Okay, so reading this graph, we kind of see, okay, so this is like the first colony treated with 1 pesticide every week, and it looks like that's kind of working, right? The number of insects is decreasing, right? This dotted graph is treated with a different pesticide, also seems to be working. This graph's treated with a pesticide, seems to go way up at first, and then it seems to kind of come back down to sort of like where it was at the beginning. So maybe it's working, we don't know. So let's kind of read the questions and see if we can figure out what they're asking. So it says, which of the following colonies showed a decrease in size every 2 weeks after the initial treatment with pesticides? So again, that kind of goes back to what we just said. The colonies that saw the decrease would be colony A, the lightly shaded colony. This dotted colony is definitely decreasing as well. However, the colony C did not. So the answer to this question would be colonies A and colony B. Colony C increased for 1 of the weeks. All right, so that would be 1 and 2 only. 14 says, of the following, which is the closest to the ratio of the total number of insects in all 3 colonies in week 8 to total number of insects at the initial time of treatment? So I had to figure this out from the graph. So looking at this, it was like I took this one was 80, this one was about 60, and that was about 60. But you figure like both of those, if you added them up, they would both be 60. So adding up those, that was 200 in the first week. And this one was about 20. This one was probably about 10, and this one was about 50. So that was about 80. So now I got 200 insects in the first week, 80 insects in that last week. So back to the question, what's the ratio? And this is important, the order in which they ask this, right? What is the ratio of the total number of insects in all 3 colonies in week 8 to the total number of insects in initial? So I'm going, what's the ratio of this number to this number? So I got to put 80 on top. That's the trick, right? So 80 over 200. And if you notice, they're all smaller number first, so that's okay. I don't think there's any distracting answers. But 80 over 200 reduces. You take a 40 out of each and you get 2/5. So the answer would be A, 2/5. All right, number 15. It says right circular cone has a volume of 24 pi cubic inches. So again, this is the one question. On every SAT, there's 58 math questions. There's usually one question that uses those formulas. So this is that one. So grab the formula from that front page. And if you forgot the front page, you go back to the first slide or all the way to the beginning. You can see that there's a formula page. So this is the formula for the volume of a cone. So it's got a volume of 24 pi. So I highlighted that. If the height of the cone is 2 inches, what is the radius of the base? So let's look what we got. So I got height of the cone is 2. Volume is 24 pi. I'm trying to find radius. So this becomes an algebra question when I'm trying to find r. So you take, and I just cancel out pi's. So I can cancel the pi's out. I'll multiply 2 times 1/3. To get rid of the 2/3, I'll multiply by 3/2 both sides. Okay, that's going to cancel it out. It's going to leave with r squared equals 36. To find r at square root, r equals 6. You could actually, after you get to this point here, you could actually see if any of the choices make sense, if you want to plug them in and try. It's up to you. But yeah, answer should be 6. Number 16. In 2015, the population of City X and City Y were equal. From 2010 to 2015, the population of City X increased by 20%, and the population of City Y decreased by 10%. If the population of City X was 120,000 in 2010, what was the population of City Y in 2010? So I just made a chart, okay? So this is probably the easiest way. I employed like this. I said City X, City Y, 2010, 2015. They give you one data point, which was that 2015 City X had 120,000 people. I'm sorry, that was this one, right? So in 2010, City X, they gave us this bit of information. Sorry, I misread. City X was 120,000 in 2010, so they gave you that bit of information. You had to find the rest of this. So you know that they have the same number in 2015, so whatever you found. So I know that City X increases by 20% between 2010 and 2015. So I took a 20% increase, so you can see that work right here. So City X increased 20%. Zoom out a little bit so you can see this, but So city X increased by 20%, so that's a multiplication of 1.2. It gives me 144,000. And then I set, in my table, I put 144,000 into city Y for 2015. The question was, how many people were in city Y in 2010? It's a tricky question, right? So then I took and said, okay, well, city Y, so the initial amount, if it decreased from 2010 to 2015, you're like, well, if I know there's 144,000 people in city Y in 2015, and the population of city Y decreased between 2010 and 2015, that you know you can already eliminate those two choices. So a lot of the SAT questions are going to have that ability to sort of say, like, I know city X and city Y are the same, and I know city Y went down, so city Y had to have more than 144,000 in 2010. So I'm like, okay, it's got to be either 160 or 240, and it only went down 10%. So you're like, 240 is like almost double. So again, you might almost be able to reason this out, but you got to sort it first, right? So I think that the biggest thing with this would be the sorting. Anyway, take the equation. You can see what I did there. The population of city Y, X times 0.90 equals 144,000 divided by 0.90. It gave me 160,000 as my answer. All right, 17 says the volume of a sphere is given by the formula, where r is the radius, which we find gives the radius of the sphere in terms of the volume. So this is a simple question where you're looking for, using this formula, you're trying to solve for r. So multiply by 3/4. So it's a lot like that other question with the cone. But multiply by 3/4, I get 3/4 v equals pi r cubed. That's divided by pi, I get 3v, 3/4, or 3v over 4 pi equals r cubed, cube root, and you get the r equals 3v over 4 pi. So that's a pretty good solving question. Some algebra 2 skills there. Number 18 is a really tricky one, and you got to read it carefully. It says the table shows the results of a survey in which tablet users were asked how often they would watch video advertisements in order to access streaming content for free. Based on the table, which of the following is closest to the probability that a tablet user answered always, given that the tablet user did not answer never? Okay, so basically, like, this one is weird. Given that the user did not answer never, I gotta consider this sample as kind of like not even including this. So in order to do this one, I treated like there were 100 people being surveyed. And I know that's weird, but because percentages are out of 100, so I kind of treated this like 100 people, and that helped me with this problem. So out of the people that I am concerned with, rarely, often, and always people, there are 68, like pretending like 68.7 people in that category. Out of that 68.7, 30.9 of those people, and I know these aren't people, but that's the way I thought about it. 30.9 out of that group said always, right? So always 30.9 divided by 68.7 is 40.4497, which is 0.45. Tricky question. You had to limit your bottom line in the probability to just those three categories: rarely, often, and always. All right, 19 says the equation above A is a constant. The graph of the equation in XY plane is a parabola. Which of the following is true about the parabola? So there's a couple things to note about this. If you know like this negative, that indicates that it's a downward facing parabola. So right away, you can eliminate A and B because those are talking about minimums, and this parabola clearly doesn't have a minimum, as a maximum. So it's either C or D. So now the question becomes like, what is it? And the maximum occurs at the vertex, and I know that because this is in vertex form, the vertex is 3, comma A. So that's it. That's the answer to D. That's just a knowing how to knowing your equations in vertex form. So if you think about vertex form of a parabola, the vertex is HK, and that's basically the gist of that parabola. And then A tells you like the stretch, and if it flips or not. If it's negative, it flips down. If it's positive, it's an upward facing parabola. All right, next page, number 20. This is the maximum value of a data set consisting of 25 positive integers is 84. A new data set consisting of 26 positive integers is created by including 96 in the set. Which of the following measures must be 12 greater? So you took a set where the highest number was 84, and you added one more number that was 96. So the only thing that's going to change drastically, the median is like barely going to change, right? It's going to change from the middle number to like the next number over. The mean is going to change a little bit because you're going to add a new number, divide by a new number. But the range is the thing that's going to change the most. That's going to change by 12 because the range is the distance between the highest and lowest value. In this case, that would be the thing that increases by 12. So that was the answer to 20. Number 21. Clayton will mix X millimeters of a 10% by mass saline solution with Y millimeters. So yeah, so all this stuff, you could read it if you want, but I'm just going to look at the equation because really this whole problem that whole first 5 lines is just telling you, like, this is the equation, this is why this works. So basically, the problem is, if Clayton uses 100 milliliters of 20%, how many milliliters of 10% must he use? So again, 20% is Y, so I replaced Y with 100, so you can see what I did there. So if 20% solution was Y, that was 100, and then X would be the question I'm looking for, so I'm solving this equation for X. So you can see the work I did there. It's a little tricky. Distribute the 0.18, you get X is 25. You could pause and look at my work, but I don't feel really need to explain it all. 22, first year Eleanor organized a fundraising event. She invited 30 people for each of the next 5 years. She doubled the number of people she had invited the previous year. So that's the question. If f of n is the number of people invited to the fundraiser n years after Eleanor began, which of the following statements best describes the function? So you got first year 30 people, second year would be 60, third 120, 240. So you can see that this is an increasing exponential relationship where every year you're doubling, so that's an exponential graph. It's not a linear. Linear is just straight up, right? That would be the same amount of increase each year. So this is an exponential increase. Sort of like bacteria in a sense, where you can, like, if you double every bacteria constantly continues to be doubled. That would be a kind of similar situation. 23, so some values of x and their corresponding values of y are shown on the table where a is a constant. If there's a linear relationship between x and y, which of the following equations represents that relationship? So this question was a pretty tricky one. I don't know if there's any tricks to be used if you see a different way to do this. I was like, oh, maybe this is the y-intercept, but it's not. The y-intercept is when x is 0, so I don't have the y-intercept. So I had to figure out this. So I used these two formulas, slope formula and point slope of a line, and then I found it in slope-intercept and converted to standard. So anyway, I found the equation between 2 points. So I labeled the points a 0, so x is a, y is 0, and the point 3a negative a, so x is 3a and y is negative a. So then I found the slope between the 2 points, so negative a minus 0 over 3a minus a. And then I actually was able to cancel out the a's and see the slope was negative a half. And then I used the point a0 and the slope, and I did point slope form. So I did y minus 0 equals negative a half, x minus a, solve that one. Distribute the negative a half, and then I multiplied everything by 2. And then I showed that work here, how I converted to standard form. So again, once I converted to standard form, I saw the answer was a. It's a little bit of a lengthy question. That was a tricky one, right? There's really no, I couldn't find any shortcuts to getting that answer, to being 100% confident in that one. All right, so 24, 25, and 26. So the first one, 24 is a scatter plot. You're going to see a lot of scatter plots, not a lot, but you see a few on the SAT for sure. It shows the number of people registered voters and the number of people who voted. So let's kind of read this scatter plot. So like these data points are kind of just telling you, like for here, if there are like here, like about, they're all kind of hard to read because they're all kind of between. You would say this one's like 200 registered voters, about 100 people voted, right? This one will say about, I don't know, 230 registered voters, about 120 people voted. So these, that's kind of how it works, how the scatter plot works. And then the line of best fit is shown. Which of the following could be the equation of line of best fit? And looking at this, it looks like if you take these 2 points, like I just took random points on the line, so it looks like 120 comma 60, and then 160 comma 80. It looks like as y increases by 10, x increases by 20. So it's kind of like that 1/2 relationship. So that's why b.5x was the answer. Number 25 is the first system we've seen on this part of the test. So the system of equations is graphed in the xy plane. What is the x coordinate of the intersection? So a couple ways you could approach this one. I chose to do elimination. So when I look at this, I say, okay, well, I look at the y's, and I'm like, well, if I multiply this by 3, then I could get positive 1.5, and that's going to cancel. So that's what I chose to do. So the top line I did not change. 2.4x minus 1.5y equals 0.3. That's staying the same. The bottom one I distributed, just to show you what I did to get this. I distributed 3 to each term. I got 4.8x, 1.5y, and negative 3.9. And now you just add them straight down. Right? Cancel out the y's, you get 7.2x equals negative 3.6, and you divide to get negative 1/2, which is negative 0.5. So that was a good system of equations. Use some decimals. You got a calculator, though. This is the calculator portion, so feel free to use it as much as you need. Number 26, it would help you to remember the simple exponential growth. There's a couple problems on the SAT that always kind of, it would be nice to have this formula somewhere. So the simple exponential growth, a equals p, parentheses 1 plus r to the t. So the rate is R. The time is T, whatever the time is. It could be days, years, whatever, based on the problem. P is the initial amount, A is the ending amount. So in this case, they're talking about pollen. So it says there were 310 pollen grains the first year and a 1% annual increase. Okay, which of the following functions models the number of pollen grains per square centimeter T years after the first year? So the beginning amount of pollen grains was 310, right? So we do this a lot of times with money or bacteria, but in this case it's pollen grains, no biggie. So that's 310. The rate is 1%, so that's 0.01, and then that's T. So if you add those together, 1.01 to the T, it's going to be D. And again, like I said, if you don't remember that formula, this could be kind of tricky. But you know, looking at the choices, you might jog your memory. But if you watch this video, hopefully you can get it right on the test. 27, 28. 27 was kind of a doozy. Again, as this test progresses, there's always, it gets harder as it goes. So if you're expecting to, look at 27 and be like, oh, it's simple. The one thing, the saving grace with a multiple choice test is one of these is the answer. So if and it is an equation, so you can just try these and plug them. And if you try -4 first, lucky you get an answer that is correct, and you could be pretty confident it's a -4. But I chose to just try to solve it and show you what that looks like. So in order to solve it, first thing I did was I added 4, and that gave me -2. So I added 4 to both sides, canceled out this 4. I got 2/3 times 9x minus 6. At this point, I was kind of like, I could distribute the 2/3. I chose to multiply by 3/2. That was probably a mistake. So just to show you, like at that point, the easier step would probably be if I got to this point, 2/3 times 9x minus 6 equals 9x minus 2. If I just distribute the 2/3, it's actually going to be easier. 2/3 times 9, you can use your calculator to calculate a test, but I know that's 6. And 2/3 times 6 is 4. So at this point, I made my life a lot harder by multiplying by the reciprocal, because when I multiply the other side by the reciprocal, I get decimals and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, when I get to this point, I can add 4, subtract 9. I'm going to get the same answer. It's just this is a different, maybe shorter route. So this is going to give me 3x equals 2. So I get x is -2/3, which is, you see what I got up here. It's just, like I said, a little bit of a shorter route. But once you get that, the question wasn't what is x. The question, what is 3x? And again, classic SAT. They have you find x, and clearly that's one of the distractors, right? So you're like, I got x, and you circle it. You got to find it. 3x minus 2. So 3 times -2/3 minus 2 is -4. So just be careful. Answer the right question. Keep working hard. Number 28, this is the function is defined as above. If k is positive, if k is a positive integer, which the following could represent the graph. So then, based off of this equation, I know that there are zeros, x-intercepts at -3 and k, right? So I'm looking for a graph here. So this one's got an x-intercept at -3, and maybe. So like I kind of held on to that one for a second. For B, it doesn't even have an x-intercept at -3. This one doesn't either. So I immediately crossed off B and C. And then I looked at the equation again, and I said, like, well, what's the difference between A and B? They both have an x-intercept at -3, but A is a downward parabola, B is an upward parabola, and based on the equation, it's not a negative in front, so I know it doesn't have that downward focus. It's the second time on this test we've seen that. So just knowing what that equation, what the characteristics of the equation do to the graph of a parabola is going to be helpful to answering a lot of questions. In this case, it's positive, so it's got to be D. All right, so now we're on to the last 2 multiple choice questions. And typically, these are the hardest questions on the test, the multiple choice portion anyways. So 29, it gives you an equation. It says the formula above can be used to approximate the height in inches of an adult male based on the length, L, in inches of his femur. What is the meaning of the 1.88 in this context? So, so this is like, so what does 1.88 mean? So 32.1 is going to be like the height of a male that has like 0 length of the femur, right? So if L is the length of the femur, the height of the male, plus 32. So like think about what the L represents. That's the length of the femur. H is going to be how tall the male is. So let's read these. So the approximate femur length in inches for a man with a height of 32 no, 1.88 is not the femur length of a male with height 32.1 because 32.01, because if you plug in 0, that would give you 32.1, and that one, the femur length wouldn't be 1.88. The femur length would be 0 to get that number, so that's not the answer. B, the approximate increase in a man's femur length for each increase of 32.01 inches in his height. Again, not true. You're not increasing that much every time. That's not your rate. 1.88 is the rate. So kind of reading through these, D is circle, you know it's the answer. The approximate increase in a man's height in inches for each 1 inch increase in his femur length. That's true. So if you think about like if a femur increases, L is the number of inches of the femur. If I plug in like 1, I'm going to get 1.88 plus 32.1. So if I increase my femur length by 1 inch, that's it. If it's 5 inches, 5 times that is going to be plus 32.1 is going to be the height of the male or whatever. So that was 29. A little bit of a tricky one, just kind of reading comprehension in a sense. 30 is one of the few geometry questions we've seen, but it has some interesting information. So in the quadrilateral above, AD is parallel to BC. So this is a trapezoid, if you don't know. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly one pair of parallel sides. So it tells us that AD is parallel to BC. So cool. It says CD is 1/2 of AB. So CD is 1/2 of AB. So I labeled that X. So if you can see what I did there, and 2X. And again, I drew this auxiliary line. This wasn't there. I know it's tricky, but if I drew that in, I labeled that X2 because I know that it's going to be the same length as this. And I know that for a lot of reasons. Again, it's parallel. I created a rectangle. Opposite sides of a rectangle are congruent, that sort of stuff. Anyway, these are the same. And then once I looked at this, I was like, and this is the tricky part about this question, but now I could see, and this is just, me being a math teacher, but I looked at this triangle, I was like, that's a 30, 60, 90. And I know it's a 30, 60, 90 because this leg is half the hypotenuse, and when that happens, you got that 30, 60, 90 relationship. Now this angle is 60. So that makes the full angle 90 plus 60 or 150. But let's talk about this for a second. If you're like, what the heck, I don't even remember 30, 60, I don't remember any of that. You do hopefully have a little bit of recollection about relative angle sizes. So I'm looking at angle B, and I'm like, there's no way angle B is 90, right? It's bigger than 90. Right, the corner of a piece of paper is 90, so that's clearly bigger than that. And then it's gonna be bigger than 120 because you think 120 is like, if you think about like 135 is essentially like a 90, and then like if you think about like another 90 cut in half, so this would be like 145. I know it's kind of weird. 135. So it'd be like 90 plus 45. I'm like, it looks like a little bit bigger. If I just draw what I think 135 looks like, I'm like, the angle here, if I can kind of like look at the comparison, is a little bit bigger. So either way, if you could kind of reason out that it's 150, make an educated guess if you're not sure how to do it. All right, so on to the grid-in part of this test. And I want to be clear, like the hardest question of the multiple choice is number 30. Relatively speaking, some of you might have thought a different question was harder, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the questions in the grid-in are going to continue in that same relative hardness, right? Relative difficulty, they start over, right? So the first question in the grid-in is typically going to be easier than the last question you just did. So based off of what I just said, let's take a look at 31 through 38. These are all answers supplied by you. So number 31, again, calculator portion of the test, use the calculator as much as you need to. Lynn has $8 to spend on apples and oranges. Apples cost 65 cents each, and oranges cost 75 cents each. If there's no tax and she buys 5 apples, what is the maximum number of oranges she can buy? And it says whole oranges because you get a decimal. But it's 65 cents for each apple plus 75% for each orange, which I labeled R because I thought would look like a 0, so I labeled it different. And that equals my $8. So if you buy 5 apples, it's $3.25 you're spending on apples. You got $8 to spend. How many oranges can you buy? You got $4.75 to buy oranges with. So that means you could divide $4.75 by 75 cents. You get 6.33. So that means you can buy 6 apples or 6 oranges that are whole. You can't buy a third of an orange. 32 is another geometry question. Again, not very many of these, but I know that these 3 angles add up to 180. That's a common, when you look at the geometry questions on the SAT, there's only about 6 of them out of 58. And they're typically the main concepts from geometry, like angles in a triangle make 180, like parallel lines, like the 30, 60, 90 thing that we just saw in the last problem. So a lot of the geometry stuff that you're going to see is like that base level geometry stuff. So anyway, it says A is 34. What is the value of B plus C? So I just A plus B plus C is 180. A is 34. I'm trying to find B plus C. Subtract 34 from 180, you get 146. So my answer is 146. 33. This is a classic like ACT question, but again, it's shown up in the SAT. But it says if the mean of 5 numbers above is 1600, what is the value of X? So I take and I do the mean. I do 700 plus this, plus this, plus this, plus x equals, divided by 5 equals the mean, 1600. Now you're solving the equation by multiply both sides by 5. So that gives me 8,000 on the right. Now add up all the numbers I know on the left. That gives me 5,500 plus x equals 8,000. X equals 2,500. So then the relationship between x and y can be written as mx, where m is a constant if y is 17 when x is a. What is the value of y when x is 2a? This is a very tricky question, but let's just write it out. If y equals mx and y is 17 when x is a, right? So the first thing I did was I just used this information to put some information into the problem. So y is 17 when x is a. So if you notice what I did, plug 17 in for y, plug a in for x. And then in order to figure this out, I had to solve for m. And I solved for m and made that 7 divided by a, you get 17 over a. Now I write it again, but now I know m is 17 over a, so I'm going to put that in, and it says x is 2a. So that's going to be the information I plug in to this part, right? And then I also plug in, well, let's highlight this green, I plug in that, right? That m is 17 over a. Now you can cancel out the a. 17 times 2 is 34. That's a tricky question, but hopefully looking at it, you're like, oh, it's not so bad. All right, so we're on to the last page. So you should feel pretty accomplished if you're with me this long, right? So 35 says in the equation above a and b are constants, and the equation has infinitely many solutions. So you got to remember what that means. Infinitely many solutions means that both sides look exactly the same, right? Infinitely many. So if you end up with 0 equals 0, that's an infinitely many situation. The first thing I did was I distributed the a, and I got ax plus ab. But I know that ax has to equal 4x, so that means a has to be 4. That's the first thing I noticed. So if a is 4 and ab is 10, right? Now plug in 4. 4b is 10, b is 5 over 2, or 2.5 if you want to make a decimal out of it. So that's how I solved that one, because I knew ab had to be 10 and I knew a had to be 4, so b had to be 10 divided by 4. 36 in the xy plane, y equals c for, this is a tricky one. A lot of stuff about parabolas in this one, but this is the key to this problem. If this equation hits one point, then it has to hit that parabola at the vertex. So there's a lot of ways you could find the vertex of a parabola. If you remember this from Algebra 2, negative b over 2a, that's one way to find the vertex. There's a few ways you could find that vertex, but you're trying to find out that the y value of the vertex is the goal here. So when I find negative b over 2a, b is 5, a is negative 1, so negative 5 over 2 times negative 1, so that gives me 5 over 2 for the x value of the vertex. I want to find the y value of the vertex, so that's going to be the equation of that horizontal line that crosses that I'm looking for. Again, the whole goal of this problem is you're trying to find the equation of this line right here, right? That point that crosses through one point, which we know, we kind of talked about already, is the vertex. So now I'm going to plug in 5 over 2 into the equation to find the y value of the vertex, and it gives me 25 over 4 when I do all the work. It's a tricky question. But if you understand, if it's intersecting this, it must hit the vertex, because otherwise it would have hit 2 or 0 points, right? When you think about like how a line, a vertical line or horizontal line and a parabola interact, usually it hits 2. Sometimes if it's like above, it hits none. So if it says it hits 1, you basically are like, okay, now I just got to find the vertex and find the y value. All right, 37 to 38 gives you some information about a peregrine falcon. So it says a peregrine falcon can reach speeds up to 200 miles per hour, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. A bird can fly that fast. Anyway, but it says, what is a peregrine falcon's maximum speed while diving to catch prey in feet per second? Ooh, okay. So I got to convert. This is a chemistry question. So this question is actually not that hard. If I take 200 miles per 1 hour and I want to convert it to feet per second, I got to cancel out the units. So I chose to figure out the distance units first. So I put the miles on the bottom so that the miles will cancel. So 1 mile is 5,280 feet. And then I got to cancel out the hours, so I put the hours on top, so they would cancel. 1 hour is 3,600 seconds. So then I end up with the units of feet and seconds. And I do 200 times 5,280 divided by 3,600. And it says nearest whole number. I get 293.3 or something, so I rounded to 293. And then lastly, number 38, a peregrine falcon dove at its maximum speed for a half mile to catch prey. How many seconds would that dive have taken? So first thing I did was say, well, a half mile is 2,640 feet, so divided 5,280 by 2. And then I said, well, if he's going 293 feet per second, how many seconds is it going to take him? Or her, the peregrine falcon, the bird, divided by 293.3, it's going to give me 9. So it gave me about 8.9 or 9.0 or something, but it was really close to 9. So that was the test. Again, go back, ask me a question. If you want, you can reach out to me, grab my email, and yeah, hopefully this helps.